Good evening. Tonight's story is The King of the Black Desert, as translated into English by Douglas Hyde and published in 1909. This story bears a certain resemblance to Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, but with a lighter mood and some more fanciful elements. Douglas Hyde gives the following introduction, which includes a Gaelic phrase that I can't possibly pronounce, so I'll put the relevant text on screen, and I have slightly rephrased his introduction so that I can say it out loud. This story was told by one Lawrence O'Flynn from near Swinford in the County Mayo to my friend the late F. O'Connor of Athlone, from whom I got it in Irish. It is the 11th story in the famous Irish folklore collection, and it is here for the first time literally translated into English. And with that, let's open our imaginations and begin. When O'Connor was king over Ireland, he was living in Rathcrolan of Connacht. He had one son, but he, when he grew up, was wild, and the king could not control him because he would have his own will in everything. One morning he went out, his hound at his foot, his hawk on his hand, his fine black horse to bear him, and he went forward, singing a verse of song to himself until he came as far as a big bush that was growing on the brink of a glen. There was a grey old man sitting at the foot of the bush, and he said, "King's son, if you're able to play as well as you're able to sing songs, I would like to play a game with you." The king's son thought that it was a silly old man that was in it, and he alighted, threw bridle over branch, and sat down by the side of the grey old man. The old man drew out a pack of cards and asked, "Can you play these?" "I can," said the king's son. "What shall we play for?" asked the grey old man. "Anything you wish," says the king's son. "All right. If I win, you must do for me anything I shall ask of you, and if you win, I must do for you anything you ask of me," says the grey old man. "I'm satisfied," said the king's son. They played the game, and the king's son beat the grey old man. Then he said, "What would you like me to do for you, king's son?" "I won't ask you to do anything for me," says the king's son. "I think you're not able to do much." "Don't mind that," said the old man. "You must ask me to do something. I never lost a bet yet that I wasn't able to pay it." As I said, the king's son thought it was a silly old man that was in it, and to satisfy him he said to him, "Take the head off my stepmother and put a goat's head on her for a week." "I'll do that for you," said the grey old man. The king's son went a-riding on his horse, his hound at his foot, his hawk on his hand, and he faced for another place, and never thought more about the grey old man until he came home. He found a cry and great grief in the castle. The servants told him that an enchanter had come into the room where the queen was and had put a goat's head on her head in place of her own head. "By my hand, but that's a wonderful thing," said the king's son. "If I'd have been at home, I'd have whipped the head off him with my sword." There was great grief on the king, and he sent for a wise counselor and asked him did he know how the thing happened to the queen. "Indeed, I cannot tell you that," said he. "It's a work of enchantment." The king's son did not let on that he had any knowledge of the matter, but on the morrow morning he went out, his hound at his foot, his hawk on his hand, and his fine black horse to bear him. And he never drew rein until he came as far as the big bush on the brink of the glen. The grey old man was sitting there under the bush and said, "King's son, will you have a game today?" The king's son got down and said, "I will." With that he threw bridle over branch and sat down by the side of the old man. He drew out the cards and asked the king's son did he get the thing he had won yesterday. "It's all right," said the king's son. "We'll play for the same bet today," says the grey old man. "I'm satisfied," said the king's son. They played. The king's son won. "What would you like me to do for you this time?" says the gray old man. The king's son thought and said to himself, "I'll give him a hard job this time." Then he said, "There's a field of 7 acres at the back of my father's castle. Let it be filled tomorrow morning with cows, and no 2 of them to be of one color or one height or one age." "That shall be done," says the gray old man. The king's son went riding on his horse, his hound at his foot, his hawk at his hand, and faced for home. The king was sorrowful about the queen. There were doctors out of every place in Ireland, but they could not do her any good. In the morning of the next day, the king's herd went out early, and he saw the field at the back of the castle filled with cows, and no 2 of them of the same color, the same age, or the same height. He went in and told the king the wonderful news. "Go and drive them out," says the king. The herd got men and went with them driving out the cows, but no sooner would he put them out on one side than they would come in on the other. The herd went to the king again and told him that all the men that were in Ireland would not be able to put out those cows that were in the field. "They're enchanted cows," says the king. When the king's son saw the cows, he said to himself, "I'll have another game with the gray old man today." That morning he went out, his hound at his foot, his hawk on his hand, and his fine black horse to bear him, and he never drew rein till he came as far as the big bush on the brink of the glen. The gray old man was there before him, and asked him would he have a game of cards. "I will," says the king's son, "but you know well that I can beat you playing cards." "We'll have another game then," says the gray old man. "Did you ever play ball?" "I did indeed," said the king's son, "but I think that you are too old to play ball, and besides that, we have no place here to play it." "If you're contented to play, I'll find a place," says the gray old man. "I'm contented," said the king's son. "Follow me," says the gray old man. The king's son followed him through the glen until he came to a fine green hill. There he drew out a little enchanted rod, spoke some words which the king's son did not understand, and after a moment the hill opened up, and the 2 went in, and they passed through a number of splendid halls until they came out into a garden. There was everything finer than another in that garden, and at the bottom of the garden there was a place for playing ball. They threw up a piece of silver to see who would have hand in, and the gray old man got it. They began then, and the gray old man never stopped until he won out the game. The king's son didn't know what he would do. At last he asked the old man what would he desire him to do for him. "I am king over the black desert, and you must find out myself and my dwelling place within a year and a day, or I shall find you out, and you shall lose your head." Then he brought the king's son out the same way by which he went in. The green hill closed behind them, and the gray old man disappeared from sight. The king's son went home, riding on his horse, his hound at his foot, his hawk on his hand, and he sorrowful enough. That evening the king observed that there was grief and great trouble on his young son, and when he went to sleep the king and every person that was in the castle heard heavy sighings and ravings from him. The king was in grief, a goat's head to be on the queen, but he was 7 times worse when they told him the whole story, how it happened from beginning to end. He sent for a wise counselor and asked him did he know where the king of the Black Desert was living. "I do not indeed," said he, "but as sure as there's a tail on the cat, unless the young heir finds out that enchanter, he will lose his head." There was great grief that day in the castle of the king. There was a goat's head on the queen, and the king's son was going to search for an enchanter without knowing whether he would ever come back. After a week, the goat's head was taken off the queen, and her own head was put upon her. When she heard of how the goat's head was put upon her, a great hate came into her against the king's son, and she said that he may never come back, alive or dead. Of a Monday morning he left his blessing with his father and his kindred. His travelling bag was bound upon his shoulder, and he went, his hound at his foot, his hawk on his hand, and his fine black horse to bear him. He walked that day until the sun was gone beneath the shadow of the hills, until the darkness of the night was coming, without knowing where he could get lodgings. He noticed a large wood on his left-hand side, and he drew towards it as quickly as he could, hoping to spend the night under the shelter of the trees. He sat down at the foot of a large oak tree and opened his traveling bag to take some food and drink, when he saw a great eagle coming toward him. "Do not be afraid of me, King's son. I know you. You are the son of O'Connor, King of Ireland. I am a friend, and if you give me your horse to give to eat to 4 hungry birds that I have, I shall bear you further than your horse would bear you, and, perhaps, I would put you on the track of him you are looking for." "You can have the horse, and welcome," said the king's son, "although I am sorrowful at parting from him." "All right. I shall be here tomorrow at sunrise." With that, she opened her great gob, caught hold of the horse, struck in his 2 sides against one another, took wing, and disappeared out of sight. The king's son ate and drank his enough, put his traveling bag under his head, and it was not long till he was asleep, and he never awoke until the eagle came and said, "It is time for us to be going. There is a long journey before us. Take hold of your bag and leap upon my back." "But to my grief," says he, "I must part from my hound and my hawk." "Do not be grieved," says she. "They will be here before you when you come back." Then he leapt on her back. She took wing, and off and away with her through the air. She brought him across hills and hollows, over a great sea, and over woods, till he thought that he was at the end of the world. When the sun was going under the shadow of the hills, she came to earth in the midst of a great desert, and said to him, "Follow the path on your right-hand side, and it will bring you to the house of a friend. I must return again to provide for my birds." He followed the path, and it was not long till he came to the house, and he went in. There was a grey old man sitting in the corner. He rose and said, "100,000 welcomes to you, King's son, from Rathcrogan of Connaught." "I have no knowledge of you," said the king's son. "I was acquainted with your grandfather," says the grey old man. "Sit down. No doubt there is hunger and thirst on you." "I'm not free from them," said the king's son. The old man then smote his 2 palms against one another, and 2 servants came and laid a board with beef, mutton, pork, and plenty of bread before the king's son, and the old man said to him, "Eat and drink your enough. Perhaps it may be a long time before you get the like again." He ate and drank as much as he desired, and thanked him for it. Then the old man said, "You are going seeking for the king of the Black Desert. Go to sleep now, and I will go through my books to see if I can find out the dwelling place of that king." Then he smote his palms together, and a servant came, and he told him, "Take the king's son to his chamber." He took him to a fine chamber, and it was not long till he fell asleep. On the morning of the next day the old man came and said, "Rise up. There is a long journey before you. You must do 500 miles before midday." "I could not do it," said the king's son. "If you are a good rider, I will give you a horse that will bring you over the journey." "I will do as you say," says the king's son. The old man gave him plenty to eat and drink, and, when he was satisfied, gave him a little white garron, and said, "Give the garron his head, and when he stops to look up into the air, and you will see 3 swans as white as snow. These are the 3 daughters of the king of the Black Desert. There will be a green napkin in the mouth of one of them. That is the youngest daughter, and there is not anyone alive except her who could bring you to the house of the king of the Black Desert. When the garron stops, you will be near a lake. The 3 swans will come to land on the brink of that lake, and they will make 3 young women of themselves, and they will go into the lake swimming and dancing. Keep your eye on the green napkin, and when you get the young women into the lake, go and get the napkin, and do not part with it. Go into hiding under a tree, and when the young women will come out, 2 of them will make swans of themselves and will go away in the air. And then the youngest daughter will say, 'I will do anything for him who will give me my napkin.' Come forward then and give her the napkin and say there is nothing you want but to bring you to her father's house, and tell her you are a king's son from a powerful country." The king's son did everything as the old man desired him, and when he gave the napkin to the daughter of the king of the Black Desert, he said, "I am the son of O'Connor, king of Connacht. Bring me to your father. Long am I seeking him." "Would it not be better for me to do something else for you?" said she. "I do not want anything else," said he. "If I show you the house, will you not be satisfied?" said she. "I will be satisfied," said he. "Now," said she, "upon your life, do not tell my father that it was I who brought you to his house, and I shall be a good friend to you. But let on," said she, "that you have great powers of enchantment." "I will do as you say," says he. Then she made a swan of herself and said, "Leap up on my back and put your hands under my neck and keep a handhold." He did so, and she shook her wings, and off and away with her over hills and over glens, over sea and over mountains, until she came to earth as the sun was going under. And then she said to him, "Do you see that great house yonder? That is my father's house. Farewell. Any time that you are in danger, I shall be at your side." Then she went from him. The king's son went to the house and went in, and who should he see sitting in a golden chair but the gray old man who had played the cards and the ball with him. "King's son," said he, "I see that you have found me out before the day and the year. How long since you left home?" "This morning, when I was rising out of my bed, I saw a rainbow. I gave a leap, spread my 2 legs on it, and slid as far as this." "By my hand, it was a great feat you performed," said the old king. "I could do a more wonderful thing than that if I chose," said the king's son. "I have 3 things for you to do," says the old king, "and if you are able to do them, you shall have the choice of my 3 daughters for a wife. And unless you are able to do them, you shall lose your head, as a good many other young men have lost it before you." Then he said, "There be's neither eating nor drinking in my house, except once in the week, and we had it this morning." "It's all one to me," said the king's son. "I could fast for a month if I were on a pinch." "No doubt you can go without sleep also," says the old king. "I can, without a doubt," said the king's son. "You shall have a hard bed tonight, then," says the old king. "Come with me till I show it to you." He brought him out then and showed him a great tree with a fork in it, and said, "Get up there and sleep in the fork, and be ready with the rise of the sun." He went up into the fork, but as soon as the old king was asleep, the young daughter came and brought him into a fine room, and kept him there until the old king was about to rise. Then she put him out again into the fork of the tree. With the rise of the sun, the old king came to him and said, "Come down now and come with me until I show you the thing you have to do today." He brought the king's son to the brink of a lake and showed him an old castle, and said to him, "Throw every stone in that castle out into the loch, and let you have it done before the sun goes down in the evening." He went away from him then. The king's son began working, but the stones were stuck to one another so fast that he was not able to raise one of them, and if he were to be working until this day, there would not be one stone out of the castle. He sat down then, thinking what he ought to do, and it was not long until the daughter of the old king came to him and said, "What is the cause of your grief?" He told her the work which he had to do. "Let that put no grief on you. I will do it," said she. Then she gave him bread, meat, and wine, pulled out a little enchanted rod, struck a blow on the old castle, and, in a moment, every stone of it was at the bottom of the lake. "Now," said she, "do not tell my father that it was I who did the work for you." When the sun was going down in the evening, the old king came and said, "I see that you have your day's work done." "I have," said the king's son. "I can do any work at all." The old king thought now that the king's son had great powers of enchantment, and he said to him, "Your day's work for tomorrow is to lift the stones out of the loch and to set up the castle again as it was before." He brought the king's son home and said to him, "Go to sleep in the place where you were last night." When the old king went to sleep, the young daughter came and brought him into the fine chamber and kept him there till the old king was about to rise in the morning. Then she put him out again in the fork of the tree. At sunrise, the old king came and said, "It's time for you to get to work." "There's no hurry on me at all," says the king's son, "because I know I can readily do my day's work." He then went to the brink of the lake, but he was not able to see a stone, the water was that black. He sat down on a rock, and it was not long until Fionnuala, that was the name of the old king's daughter, came to him and said, "What have you to do today?" He told her, and she said, "Let there be no grief on you. I can do that work for you." Then she gave him bread, beef, mutton, and wine. After that she drew out the little enchanted rod, smote the water of the lake with it, and in a moment the old castle was set up as it had been the day before. Then she said to him, "On your life, don't tell my father that I did this work for you, or that you have any knowledge of me at all." On the evening of that day the old king came and said, "I see that you have the day's work done." "I have," said the king's son. "That was an easy done job." Then the old king thought that the king's son had more power of enchantment than he had himself, and he said, "You have only one other thing to do." He brought him home then, and put him to sleep in the fork of the tree, but Fionnuala came and put him into the fine chamber, and in the morning she sent him out again into the tree. At sunrise the old king came to him and said, "Come with me till I show you your day's work." He brought the king's son to a great glen and showed him a well and said, "My grandmother lost a ring in that well, and do you get it for me before the sun goes under this evening." Now, this well was 100 feet deep and 20 feet round about, and it was filled with water, and there was an army out of hell watching the ring. When the old king went away, Fionnuala came and asked, "What have you to do today?" He told her, and she said, "That is a difficult task, but I shall do my best to save your life." Then she gave him beef, bread, and wine. Then she made a diver of herself and went down into the well. It was not long till he saw smoke and lightning coming up out of the well, and he heard a sound like thunder, and anyone who would be listening to that noise would think that the army of hell was fighting. At the end of a while the smoke went away, the lightning and thunder ceased, and Fionnuala came up with the ring. She handed the ring to the king's son and said, "I won the battle, and your life is saved. But look, the little finger of my right hand is broken. But perhaps it's a lucky thing that it was broken. When my father comes, do not give him the ring, but threaten him stoutly. He will bring you then to choose your wife, and this is how you shall make your choice. I and my sisters will be in a room. There will be a hole in the door, and we shall all put our hands out in a cluster. You will put your hand through the hole, and the hand that you will keep hold of when my father will open the door, that is the hand of her you shall have for wife. You can know me by my broken little finger." "I can, and the love of my heart you are, Fionnuala," says the king's son. On the evening of that day the old king came and said, "Did you get my grandmother's ring?" "I did indeed," said the king's son. "There was an army out of hell guarding it, but I beat them, and I would beat 7 times as many. Don't you know I'm a Connacht man? Give me the ring, says the old king. Indeed I won't give it, says he. I fought hard for it. But do you give me my wife. I want to be going. The old king brought him in and said, My 3 daughters are in that room before you. The hand of each of them is stretched out, and she on whom you will keep your hold until I open the door, that one is your wife. The king's son thrust his hand through the hole that was in the door and caught hold of the hand with the broken little finger and kept a tight hold of it until the king opened the door of the room. This is my wife, said the king's son. Give me now your daughter's fortune. She has no fortune to get, but the brown slender steed to bring you home, and that ye may never come back, alive or dead. The king's son and Fionnuala went riding on the brown slender steed, and it was not long till they came to the wood where the king's son left his hound and his hawk. They were there before him, together with his fine black horse. He sent the brown slender steed back then. He set Fionnuala riding on his horse, and leapt up himself, his hound at his heel, his hawk at his hand, and he never stopped till he came to Rathcrogan. There was great welcome before him there, and it was not long till himself and Fionnuala were married. They spent a long, prosperous life, but it is scarcely that even the track of this old castle is to be found today in Rathcrogan of Connacht. The best sentence in this story is, of course, there was an army out of hell guarding it, but I beat them, and I would beat 7 times as many. Don't you know I'm a Connacht man? This story is actually so weird when you pay attention to the details. First of all, this king's son is the hero who absolutely does the least. Everyone he encounters makes sure he gets a good meal. Everyone gives him a ride, either by flying him around or giving him a host. He never even has a rough night's sleep, not one time in the whole story. And then, okay, so back at the beginning, he asked the old man to swap out his stepmother's head because he thinks nothing will come of it. Then he asks for the field full of cows because he thinks it's impossible. Then when he sees all the cows, he says, boy, am I going to do that again today. So you think that his third wish is therefore going to be like the big one, the important one. But instead, when he gets to the old man, he immediately says, well, you know, I can beat you at cards. So they play a different game. Why would he do that? So then the old man beats him at playing ball, and then the old man says, come and find me or I'll kill you, which is also inexplicable. If he wanted to kill him, surely he would have done it already. And is that what the old man wanted the whole time? And why? So then the hero has the easiest adventure of any hero ever, and the Princess Fionnuala does absolutely everything, including fighting the armies of hell to recover her great-grandmother's ring. And I like that for once, actually, the girl is the only character in the story with a name. And actually, that aspect of the story is so fitting because Rathcrogan is the absolute epicenter of girl bosses in Ireland. And please forgive all the terrible pronunciations that are about to follow, but Rathcrogan means Fort of Crochan, which was the seat of the Connachta, the prehistoric rulers of that part of Roscommon in Ireland. Today, Rathcrogan is a complex of over 240 archaeological sites, dating all the way back to like Neolithic times, 4,000 or 5,000 years BC. Because it is so ancient and it is so important, it is continually referenced in Irish folklore, mythology, and history. Rathcrogan was the seat of Connacht's warrior Queen Maeve, as well as having a cave that was the home of the Morrigan, the pre-Christian Celtic goddess monster queen. Crochan actually was named after Crochan, a member of the Eiscí, a supernatural race of beings who were sort of the precursors of fairies, who fell in love with the mound, and she was given it as her dwelling as she returned from the underworld through the cave of the cats. Please let me know if you want me to research and share any of these stories on this channel. It would be absolutely fascinating. Interestingly, despite what it says in this story, archaeologists have identified the site as containing burial mounds, ring forts, defensive earthworks, various enclosures, but no castle. The focal point of the complex is the Rathcron Mound, a broad, flat-topped circular mound with a smaller mound on the summit. It was built over the top of a much older enclosure of concentric stone rings. The site also has numerous other mounds, caves, standing stones, and other monuments. If you listen all the way to the end of the video, I make a little confession out here. This week's confession is that I get super nervous about pronouncing unfamiliar words, and I search all over Google and YouTube to try to find out how to say it, and then I pepper my script with little pronunciation cues, and sometimes I still get it wrong. As a person who listens to stories and audio on YouTube myself, I can sometimes find it distracting when someone mispronounces a word, so I don't want to be that person. And then there are some things that I'll just never get used to, like otherwise civilized people referring to the famous brand of footwear as Nike. I didn't grow up bilingual, so I came a bit later in life to learning other languages, and I've realized how unusual English is regarding pronunciation. Other languages might have very simple or consistent pronunciation, but they might have, for example, very complex grammar. Spelling and pronunciation in English are so difficult that we're actually pretty slack about grammar. So I am more fixated on pronunciation than is perhaps necessary, and people from other cultures maybe don't worry about it so much. But good Lord, Celtic words look so vastly different on a page than they sound when they are spoken, and the internet is not especially helpful a lot of the time. With your permission and your forgiveness, I will keep on stumbling through it because these stories are just so good. And if you like good stories, you should subscribe to the channel. Every week on Restored Lore, I find old, odd, obscure stories from around the world and I share them with you, and you wouldn't want to miss anything. Please also drop a like on this video and share it if you think it's worth sharing. All those little things really do help to boost the channel, and I am so grateful for the help. Have a great night. I will see you next week.